Hi there, Michael back. Got my friend Snowy. I want to go over a fundamental skill in the reading section on the SAT, which is to comprehend complex sentences. The idea here is to break a sentence down to its part, what I call get rid of the noise, see through the sentence, and then isolate the main idea, and then add back in the noise as it's relevant. So I'm going to take test 10. The second passage, it's a social science passage. It's an expository or argumentative essay. And it has a very long sentence which answers one of the questions, question 15, and I want to show you how we can make sense of that by breaking it down and actually applying a fundamental skill we don't teach kids anymore, which is called sentence diagramming, which helps us to see how a sentence works. So it's a diagram of a sentence. I'll show you an example of that. Okay, here we go to the tablet. All right, I'm on practice test 10. I'm going to go down to the second passage here. I think it's on page 7. Here we go. It's not a too complicated of one, but I see a lot of students get one of these questions wrong, and it involves a very, very long sentence. It's question number 15. It's a evidence question, right? So, but this should be our correct answer here, 31 to 40. If to on, look how that goes, 9 lines. So, or it's actually 10 lines. And that's quite long. And when kids look at this, it like blah, blah, blah. It starts here and it goes all the way down to, I guess, down to here, doesn't it? Right there. That's a long sentence. And now the evidence goes to 40. So we can sort of cut it off here. This is not evidence for us to really consider. We don't have to, but I like to add it back into this sentence just for the sake of understanding the sentence, not for answering the question. So we have to go to here, although the sentence goes on further from that, just recognizing that. Okay, so we're looking for how would the author most likely characterize many attempts to improve traffic? Let's break the sentence down. So I'm going to put this on a whiteboard, and I'm going to take the sentence that we're looking at here, which is a very long sentence. Okay, here's our long sentence. Here it goes. Wow, that's a lot. It's a complex sentence. It's not a really complicated idea, but with all these words just get in the way of us. So let's get rid of the noise. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of any parenthetical phrases. So I go in here and I see a comma here and a comma here. So those two commas are creating they're creating what we call a parenthetical or set aside phrase. And so I'm going to pull that out of there, and I'm going to leave that behind, and therefore I go and I add that text down here. So I'm getting parenthetical phrases right here. Got my first one here, and then I'm going to add, and I see that there's another parenthetical phrase here, and that goes all the way down to there. And I'm going to pull that out, and I'm going to put that into a new little box here. So I have two parenthetical phrases that I've just pulled out. And so these are, let's just label these here. These are parenthetical phrases. Okay, so they're not necessary. They're there to add information. That's what they do. They tell us a little bit more, in this case with the dashes, in this case with the commas. And so let me get rid of my mess here. Okay, now this leaves us again with if municipalities take steps, blah, blah, blah. So at this point, I see I have another little phrase here, by, blah, blah, blah. Now this is the one that I believe is not in our question, so by. So this we don't need to worry about, but I want you to see how it's part of the long sentence, so it can get confusing. So let's go ahead and keep it in for our purposes here. But I do want to get rid of it. So let's go back in and let's get rid of that. And I can see I've got, all righty, here we go. Come on, Microsoft, help me out. So I want to pull this out and I want to get rid of that. I'm going to add that extra information. It's actually a very large prepositional phrase. And we can add that down here. We just pull that aside. So now I've got a more simple sentence. If municipalities take steps that make long distance car commuting faster or more convenient, and then I need to put in a little comma there because that comma was replaced by the dash. And so that's not really what we want here. So let me add a comma, and we can see it make a little more sense. And we see that we have two clauses here. I have a introductory or subordinate clause starting with the if, and that leaves us our main clause. We actually make the small problem worse. Now let's see what that looks like in a sentence diagram. If municipalities take steps to make long-distance car commuting faster, more convenient, added the comma, we actually make the sprawl problem worse. Now this is a sentence diagrammer. I recommend this program. It's available for a very small license fee on the Windows store. We have a lot of different ways we can look at this. So one of the problems with diagramming is that it doesn't understand the meaning of the sentences, so it's able to just sort of pull apart, well, what does the word if do, right? So that's a subordinated conjunction, and in this case it kind of threw it right there in the middle. So I'm going to go with the one that looks best to me, which is number 8, which what it does here is it isolates our main clause. We make problem worse, and then we have the if. Now notice how this is a conjunction, it's a subordinate conjunction. Notice how the word if is connecting municipalities take steps. This is a clause, but it's subordinated by the if. So our main clause is right here. We make problem worse, and then we add in things like our adverb actually. For the problem, we have an adjective modifier. We have a article, which is an adjective modifier, and then we have our object complement adjective, right? We make problem worse. So we have our subject. We make what? The problem. We make the problem worse. All right. Now, how do we make the problems? If municipalities take steps. Now, we have also this other actually, it's a relative conjunction, a relative creates a relative clause with that. Take steps that, what? Steps that, and then we have here our that is operating as this calls it a relative of subject of relative clause. It's a pronoun, it's actually a relative pronoun, but that, what does? Steps make commuting faster. See how we go there? That make commuting faster. And then we have my, and then what about long distance commuting, car commuting? And then we have this conjunction here that creates a combination of faster or convenient. All right, so now we see what's going on here. We make the problem worse. Municipalities take steps. If municipalities take steps that make commuting more convenient or faster. Now let's see if that answers our question here. Does it not? So we're looking for if and we get rid of that in a misguided way. Again, we're looking with if municipalities take steps to make it faster, we make the problem worse. And we can see when we go to the question itself, we get they are doomed to fail because people like driving. This says nothing about driving too fast. They overestimate how tolerant they are. They're well-intentioned but lead to environmental harm. So where do we get that out of there? If they take steps to make long-distance car commuting faster and more convenient. Now, I don't see anything in this our main clause here that tells us that they're well-intentioned. So we may have to look into those parenthetical phrases that add that information, but the lead to environmental harm, we can see that it makes the sprawl problem worse. So that does give us environmental harm. We can test that well-intentioned, but meanwhile, let's eliminate D. They will only work if they make driving more economical and productive, and it doesn't talk about productivity or economy. So our answer is C, but let's see when we go back to our whiteboard here, we see that we have if municipalities take steps that make long distance commuting faster or more convenient. Well, what are those steps? Well, it's a misguided effort to do something of environmental value there, right? So it's well intentioned. It's a misguided effort. And then what does that effort do? By adding lanes and blah, blah, blah. All this is just noise, just telling us a little bit more information about how these things fit into each other. So these parenthetical phrases kind of answer questions. Well, if they do what? If they take steps. What about the steps? Well, they're misguided efforts to do something of value. Well, what are the steps? How do they do it? By adding lanes and so on and so forth. Now, this one here adds information to the main clause. We actually make the sprawl problem worse. How? By indirectly encouraging people to live still further from their jobs, blah, 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 and by. So we have that conjunction here. Forcing municipalities to extend roads and so on and so forth. All right, so this is a very complex sentence that we see, and we look at it, we go, ugh, our eyes roll in the back of the head. If we break it down, get rid of this parenthetical phrase, get rid of this parenthetical phrase. This is how you can see it in the actual, in the text itself. We have our actual sentence here. We actually make the sprawl problem worse, and we start with our are a subordinate clause if municipalities make long-distance car commuting faster and more convenient. I hope that's a useful exercise for you. What I want to emphasize is that this sentence diagramming, the whole job is to see what the different parts of the sentences are doing. So I hope it looks a little complicated if you've never seen it before, but all it's doing is it's telling us that, well, here's the main clause. It puts it at the top. Here's our subordinating conjunction, right? And here's our subordinate clause. Municipalities take steps. And then what about that? Now we add our relative clause introduced by the word that. And then what about that? It makes, what does it make? It makes commuting, which is what it makes. It's the direct object of that makes. What is that makes? Well, municipalities take steps that make commuting faster or more convenient. And these are just adjectives there to tell us a little bit more about the things we're talking about that make commuting what? Faster and convenient. Okay, so the idea is to break the sentence down into its smallest part, get rid of the noise, bring it back in, separate from the main sentence and the main clauses that create that main sentence. If this, then that. So that's when we get that if subordinate conjunction. If into the subordinate clause. If this happens, then that will happen, which is our main clause. And then we bring back the information through those prepositional phrases and those parenthetical, set aside by dashes or commas, are parenthetical phrases that build up the information. Hope that helps.